Pachamari needs a hug.
Hello SCC, it's Jade here. No fancy intro, sorry, I'm busy with a very big project, I guess I could call it. It requires the heavy use of my witchy space powers plus a little bit of criminal intent. Anyways, today we're going to be covering a fairly new commentator named Crazy Flame7. Is the 7 supposed to be a part of the Flame phonetically? I don't know, but it's awesome either way. Crazy, and or Flame7, is doing a commentary on a YouTube short by C.com about Kirby. Yes, get your second nickel ready, this is another random Kirby related video. By the way, personal thing I'll just say, but I think it's weird to do a commentary on one single YouTube short instead of multiple. I think I'm just very fond of the thematic multi-shot commentaries. I feel like they have the potential to be much more entertaining. We need to bring those back, guys. Or maybe I should bring them back. Be the change I want to see in the world. Uh-oh, I've been talking too much. Video go now.
Disclaimer. Do not harass the person in question. This video is made for entertainment purposes and for critique. Spoilers for Planet Robobot, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Kirby Star Allies, Kirby Dreamland 3, Kirby 64 Crystal Shards, Kirby Triple Deluxe, and Kirby Adventure.
There's something very wrong with this disclaimer. The visuals. The colors, everything being similar in saturation, combine that with the low contrast of the background. This is just a nightmare for colorblind people. I don't know what editing program you're using, but honestly, you could just remake this in something like Canva. Not sponsored, but it's free and very easy to use for simple stuff like this. All it needs is a white or black outline and you're good. Also, to channel the spirit of Grammar Master Ephraim, the second sentence in this disclaimer should be more like, "This is for the sole purpose of entertainment and critique." Otherwise, it just sounds awkward.
Hello there, Bailey here. You are probably wondering, where am I right now? Well, you see, a certain crystallized hedgehog decided to trap me here after saying I didn't like mac and cheese.
Okay, listen, I'm not gonna harp on this too harshly because developing your video speaking voice is a thing that comes with time and practice, plus some people have speech impediments they literally cannot control, which I'm keeping in mind as well. So here's my suggestions: subtitles, speaking louder, and enunciating. There are several moments in this video where it's pretty hard to comprehend what you're saying, and I think part of it is also due to the mic quality. If you're unable to do the other two, you can pretty much knock all of these out by writing your own subtitles anyway.
You see, this is the Hell Dimension. You see, it's normally orange, but I have conquered it and turned every fire in here green.
Green fire? Oh no dude, you aren't in the Hell Dimension, you're on the freaking green sun! Just stay calm. If you find the fourth wall, we can escape before the carapace turned god mobster assassin finds us.
For some reason, the tornado in the background is just refreshing. I do not know how to get out. It's screaming and I don't know why. Anyway, today we are covering a YouTube short made by C.com. For context, Kirby is a popular Nintendo character known for his overwhelming power. And C.com disagrees with that notion, and I have a few problems with his points. With that all out the way, let's get started.
Okay, so first, Kirby is definitely not a thing that needs to be upfront in the context department. Second, this is very awkward in the way it's structured. Not only that, but the mumbled delivery can make it a bit confusing on first watch. I feel like a better explanation would be to just say C-Dot made a video trying to argue that Kirby was not as strong as people say he is. Actually, if we're being real here, you don't necessarily need a summary of context anyway, because the YouTube short you're talking about explains everything within half a second. Also, work on cutting things better when it comes to both editing in your source video as well as editing your audio together. The cuts in this portion are very janky and overlap with each other.
Nintendo character. We all know little guy, and for some reason the general consensus is that Kirby is all-powerful, but that is just not the case. And allow me to explain. Now the main point of discussion is that Kirby's fought gods.
Okay, if I can say something about C-Dot real quick, why on earth is your audio like that? It nearly drowns out your voice, dude. Like, it's not even funny, it's just annoying.
But has he though? Has he really? Let's take a look at these contenders. Let's see, there's 002, Magalore, Zectonia, Stardream, Void Termina, Fecto Elphalis. None of those count. Check my video.
Oh, you're making us check another video? Alright, I'll bite. Let's do it.
How many gods has Kirby fought? Last time I got rudely interrupted, so now I have to do this while I'm sick, which is just so crazy. Kirby is no stranger to otherworldly foes, but I don't know if they would count as god because they aren't classified as one. So now it is time to see which ones look close enough to a biblically accurate name. Starting off, there was 0 and 02. Now these lives are just highs. I think they would need a bit more of them to be classified as a god. The more recent Kirby games, I feel kind of starting to go into this, we are fighting gods now a bit more. I feel that the sentiment really comes from Kirby's star allies and the final boss called, Destroyer of Worlds. Then Smash Bros. Ultimate's opening cutscene also adds to Kirby's list of almost gods.
And while the last Kirby fights are definitely big, strong fellas, there's no specific way to classify them into any certain category.
You traitor! I should have known
Ain't that way.
You do not actually prove this for a fact.
I feel like my brain is vibrating with how that video, in some unfortunate disaster, managed to feel dragged out while still being sped up to the point where it would be incomprehensible without those subtitles, of which subtitles had to be speed read whilst listening to very harsh noises that were caused by the speed. Needless to say, I have a headache. Thanks, Flame7. Anyways, that also leads me to say, you did not need to play that entire video. The only reason why C-Dot referred to that video was so that he didn't have to re-explain why those villains don't count as gods. The explanation itself isn't entirely necessary to that other video. If you really insisted, the only part that was needed was his criteria for what is a god, that being a biblically accurate angel, I guess, which is woefully shallow in its own right, but I'm covering Crazy Flame, not C-Dot. As for your interjection here, it just entirely misses the mark. I don't blame you because C-Dot goes about this in the weirdest way possible, but he's not trying to say objectively which characters aren't gods, but trying to classify which ones would be, specifically in a biblical sense. So not only is it focusing on implications when it's not needed, it is also acting as if C-Dot's personal classification is supposed to be objective. Again, the only reason this video was brought up was optional context to his other video. It also doesn't matter either because according to his own way of classification, he is proving who is and isn't a god. I know, it's stupid because it is completely based on visuals rather than lore. Not really my job to point out though.
Secondly, how are them not being gods prove that Kirby's weak? Well, yes, Kirby's power in our eyes are a little less than we initially thought if they're not gods, but just because they are not gods doesn't mean they are not big threats.
There is a whole lot I could say about this. Believe it or not, I had a giant tangent about how C-Dot seems to be trying to argue more so that Kirby isn't all-powerful rather than just weak full stop. But I think the more pressing matter at the very moment is that you're jumping the gun when we haven't even gotten to C-Dot's main arguments yet. You're still on a video that amounts to theorizing which bosses have the biggest power level.
Let's go down the list of examples you listed, shall we? 0 and 02 seem to be the same due to 02's bandage on their head and their resemblance to a fallen angel.
I'm gonna stop you right here, right now, and tell you that none of this matters. 1, you already said that whether or not these characters are gods does not make Kirby weak. 2, the very first boss you talk about is when C-Dot does consider a god, at least the closest one to godliness. And 3, regardless of all of that, what you have to say about these bosses do nothing to C-Dot's personal classification of them. You know, the one he explicitly said at the start of that second video. Go next. Oh, actually, before we move on, I'd like to give a little advice. When I did my video on Toganium, I was very clear about where I was getting my Kirby lore from. The reason why I did that is because wikis can be edited by anyone, which means that there's the non-zero chance of them containing misinformation. This is especially true for fandom wikias. You know what else those fandom wikias contain? Theories, interpretations, and trivia that is inherently tied to a fan's subjective views on the media. This is why, above all else, when it comes to these topics, you should be primarily looking at what is said about these characters in-game. There are plenty of pause screen lore dumps in Kirby, especially for the characters from Kirby and the Forgotten Land. That being said, if you're going to use information from wikis, please be transparent about it.
You flipped the car? Perhaps I am in need of a more worthy nemesis.
And yes, I get it. You are simply trying to debunk one of the fan base's main points. But you see, the problem with that is, it doesn't really work. Because just because they are not gods does not mean there's still not constant threats that Kirby has to deal with that endangers planets or even galaxies.
That's great and all, but you really didn't need to repeat the only thing close to a good point you had in this entire interjection, especially since, once again, this video isn't trying to debunk anything in particular. This was quite the meaningless ending segment.
You have to explain how these are not threats, or just how are they less threatening compared to other Nintendo villains because you claim Kirby was the weakest Nintendo character. Like, for example, you could say Vector Ephelis is weaker than Dreamy Bowser.
It is vexing me greatly that you're randomly ignoring the part of C-Dot's first video where he specifically says he wants to explain why he isn't all-powerful. I, for one, think that weakest Nintendo character was supposed to be a catchy hook, as most YouTube shorts like that have. But I guess you could take that with a grain of salt. I can't see into C-Dot's mind. I don't know what his true intentions were with that very slight inconsistency. I just think there's a point to be made about it. One that involves you arguing an argument that hasn't been argued yet. I don't even know if I should entertain this word salad of an interjection. It's not like he is inherently wrong. He has just moved the goalpost away from the original idea. Kirby is all-powerful because he has beaten gods, being rebutted with how is he all-powerful when you can't technically consider these creatures gods. Now, part of this is on C-Dot because of that slight inconsistency with what his thesis statement is supposed to be, but it is getting pretty convoluted in a way that was never necessary, and I'm ready to move on already.
There's one thing that every single one of these fights have in common. That is, Kirby doesn't beat the boss on his own, whether that be with the help of a powered-up ability, another item, or with the help of other people. Stardream could only be defeated with a Robobot armor and halberd, same goes for Void Termina with a Star Ally Sparkler and company. For Fecto Elfless, you literally need half the boss to defeat the boss.
So to tackle your upgrade ability and tool point, literally most characters that fight use an ability of sorts or a tool to beat their enemies.
Excuse me? Is this another other characters are like this, so that means you're somehow wrong point? Next thing I know, you're gonna start simping for a grifter. God, I'm sick of deja vu. How does this keep happening to me? Anyways, this doesn't debunk anything, or really make any kind of argument against what C-Dot is saying. The characters you refer to aren't on the same level as Kirby. One of the examples isn't even a specific named character. If you wanted a Splatoon example, maybe consider any of the agents from the various story modes. Otherwise, what you're saying is that children playing paintball is comparable to the borderline cosmic terror that is Kirby lore. Oh my god, Sonic's speed is an ability inherent to his person, so that one can't even count. Sonic Heroes is right there, man. He's not even a Nintendo character. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Basically, these comparisons don't do anything to the idea that Kirby isn't all-powerful because he needs additional help. Yes, maybe it says something about the idea of him being the weakest Nintendo character, but otherwise, unless these characters were also considered unstoppable gods like Kirby, this essentially means nothing.
And with the help of other people point, was Kirby still not the main reason why they beaten most of these threats?
Crazy Flame. The point is that Kirby is weak because he wasn't 1v1ing these bosses. Whether or not he got help because he rolled a nat 20 on Charisma is irrelevant.
And you chose the worst examples to prove your point with. To start off with Planet Robobot, Kirby literally needs to ride in the mech suit to even have its absorb ability. So the mech suit can't even absorb Halberd without Kirby piloting it, therefore still the main reason why they're able to fuse and win against Stardream.
Hey, what? The mech doesn't work without Kirby, so therefore he is not weak. Alright, yeah buddy, I am legitimately baffled at what this is supposed to do to C-Dot's video. A plane can't fly without the pilot, so therefore Kirby is 9/11 or something. I don't know, man.
And for your Star Allies example, Kirby was still the one who assembled the 4 friends, therefore allowing the Sparkler to exist. And even then, Kirby still was the one that summoned the other friends to fight for Termina. Therefore, once again, Kirby was still the main reason why they were able to win that fight.
There is a very notable trend of repetition amongst the points that you make. This doesn't feel like you're adding on to your argument. You're just repeating the same basic idea, that Kirby is so cool he summoned all these people to help, so therefore he isn't weak. This entire time you've been pretty much dancing around the point, and it is getting tiring. If Kirby wasn't weaker than these bosses, if he was the unstoppable godly creature that everyone makes him out to be, then he wouldn't need these summoned devices or groups to help him.
And for your Vector Ephelis example, Kirby literally had to fight Ephelis to weaken him down to almost 1 health and release Elfin. In fact, we have good reason to believe that if Ephelis didn't fly off, Kirby could have beaten him by himself without Elfin. Given that Kirby's normal attack did damage Ephelis. Either way, Kirby did most of the heavy lifting. Either way, in all of these examples you provided, no matter if his friends helped him or not, Kirby was still the main reason why he won those fights. And the worst part is, There were better examples you could have provided of this. For example, Kirby had to get launched by Deity towards Nightmare, which from there, Kirby had to use the Star Rod to defeat him. And keep in mind, the Star Rod is not one of Kirby's abilities. And in Kirby 64 Crystal Shards, Kirby had to use the Crystal Gun to defeat Zero Two, and had to have Ribbon carry him to avoid Zero Two's attacks.
Hey, look at that, an actual good point about the Fector Phyllis fight. As a reward, I will have mercy on you and choose to ignore the continued ungodly amount of repetition and the fact that you're now trying to support his argument when your video is literally called Kirby is Not Weak. Let's instead talk about how you contradicted your own arguments by trying to provide C-Dot with additional arguments. Crazy Flame, how is Kirby using the Star Rod and Crystal Shards any different from him using a mech in Robobot or the Sparkler in Star Allies? The answer is, it's not. According to you, this would still mean that Kirby is the main reason why these bosses were defeated. Crazy how that works, right? Not like that point even debunks the idea that Kirby is weak, but you know, details.
And again, the Crystal Gun is not one of Kirby's abilities, and Ribbon is not one of Kirby's abilities either. Well, in your Robobot example, you could have talked about how Susie provided the radar armor, and how Meta Knight had to release Kirby to help it in order to have it finish off Star Dream.
Wasn't the Planet Robobot mech an example that you considered bad because it only worked with Kirby? What's the noun you use to describe the flow of liquid and logic? Consistency, which is all I have ever asked for.
And again, all your examples were bad because Kirby was still pivotal to those victories. And you are implying that he was not.
Just like your own examples, right? Also, you have ostensibly misunderstood the original argument. He wasn't saying Kirby was not the driving force to these fights. He's saying that for the 50 billionth time, that because Kirby needs extra help means he is, on his own, weaker than his opponents.
I know that it is stated that Kirby has infinite power, but that doesn't mean the little guy can utilize it well. There are no thoughts in his brain. Does he have a brain? And don't forget, he still is just an 8-inch tall lad. I would never want to hurt Kirby, but if it came down to it...
Yet at the beginning of this clip, you literally showed Kirby fighting with the sand ability. What are you talking about when you say he doesn't know how to utilize his power? And that's the end of the video. Final thoughts? I feel C-Dog needs to explain his points. While yes, this is a YouTube short, his points really was in need of explanation given the fact that saying that something's not a god does not disprove Kirby's strength. Saying that he needs help with certain tools does not disprove it either, especially when Kirby's still the main reason why they won.
Okay, alright, I'm gonna stop this train wreck right here. I'm like 99% sure C-Dot was just trying to segue into an ending bit. Like, it comes off as on purpose trying to be silly, so we're just gonna leave that there. Your final thoughts are just a mess. The word salad becomes word vomit, and you continue to repeat the same one single argument over and over again. Subsequently, I feel like this is a good opportunity to move on to my final thoughts. Don't worry, it'll be short and to the point. Bring out the list. Let's start with the easiest point, and ironically the one I've repeated thrice now. Your video is riddled with redundancies, and every time I lull myself into believing that you're actually going to elaborate on something, I am greeted with the unfortunate reality that you just don't. If you need a jumping off point when it comes to explaining things more in depth, ask yourself questions about the arguments you're presented with. Why does Kirby being able to gather all of his allies make him strong? What in-game lore disproves the notion that Kirby is weak? What does it really mean to be weak in this context? That last one is more meta, but I think it matters in this kind of discussion. This next point is going to be pretty short because it is something that comes with a lot of variables. However, all of these issues can either be compensated for or simply come with time. The low mic quality makes it hard to understand your mumbling. The editing is janky and hard to cut around. There is barely any visual flair or music, and just a notable lack of polish. I feel as though audio is the most important though, so that is probably something you should focus on the most. Do retakes when it's needed and make sure your clips don't bleed together. Back to much more pressing matters, this video is very bare bones when it comes to actually formulating arguments. I joked a bit about it before, but there really is only like 2 actual points in this video, which is a bit disappointing to me because there are plenty of things you could say about both of the C-Dot videos that were shown. Here, I'll even list them. C-Dot's whole premise is built on bad faith. There is no defined idea of what weak means in the context of these games. He bases everything on subjective classification that is not not compatible with the lore, and he chose the wrong format for this kind of thing, which also makes me think that maybe there's a chance C-Dot wasn't being entirely serious. I don't know though, people like him are hard to parse. Regardless, it's kind of hard to give advice on how to be more analytical. It's kind of just a skill you have to learn. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Now, if you excuse me, Jason and I have dimensions to meddle with. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the stars.